My beloved child. Stop scrolling for just a moment. There are stories that entertain, stories that inspire, and then there are stories that seem to arrive at exactly the moment someone needs them most. Perhaps this is one of those stories. Perhaps, for reasons you cannot yet explain, these words found you tonight because your heart has been carrying questions too heavy to speak aloud. Imagine, just for a moment, that somewhere beyond the stars, where time moves differently and every tear is remembered, a messenger of light watches the countless paths of human lives. Not to condemn. Not to frighten. But to witness the quiet battles that no one else sees. In this story, that messenger pauses over one particular home. A home filled with memories. A home where laughter once echoed through hallways that now feel strangely quiet. A home where old photographs still rest on shelves, silently guarding moments that can never return. And within that home lives someone whose heart has been wounded more deeply than anyone realizes. Perhaps that someone reminds you of yourself. The messenger does not speak immediately. Instead, it watches the invisible threads connecting every choice, every regret, every act of kindness, and every painful word that was spoken in anger years before. Those threads stretch farther than human eyes can see, weaving together lives that believe they have already drifted apart forever. Far away, another person sits alone in the fading light of evening. They appear calm on the outside. Inside, however, silence has become unbearable. There was a time when pride convinced them they were right. There was a time when hurting another person seemed easier than admitting their own fears. There was a time when they believed broken trust could simply be forgotten. But stories have a way of returning to unfinished chapters. The messenger knows something that neither person yet understands. A moment is approaching. Not because destiny demands punishment. Not because heaven delights in sorrow. But because truth has a way of arriving when every disguise has grown too heavy to carry. Yet truth rarely announces itself gently. It often enters ordinary days wearing the clothes of unexpected news. No trumpet sounds. No lightning splits the sky. Instead, an ordinary morning begins like every other. Coffee grows cold on a kitchen table. A phone rests quietly beside forgotten keys. Outside, birds continue singing, unaware that before sunset, one family will look at one another differently than ever before. Nothing seems unusual. That is precisely what makes the moment unforgettable. The messenger looks toward the wounded soul and whispers, not into their ears, but into the quiet places where hope has almost disappeared. Do not mistake silence for abandonment. Those words drift through the story like light through stained glass. The wounded soul cannot hear them consciously. But somehow, their breathing becomes steadier. They cannot explain why. Across town, the one who caused the deepest pain opens an old drawer while searching for something completely unrelated. Inside lies a photograph. The edges have curled with age. Dust covers part of the smiling faces. For years they ignored it. Today, without understanding why, they cannot look away. Memories begin returning, not the pleasant ones first, but the moments they tried hardest to bury. The argument. The betrayal. The sentence they wished they had never spoken. The expression on another person's face just before everything changed. Their hands begin trembling. Not from fear. From recognition. Sometimes the heaviest burden is not the pain we receive. It is finally seeing the pain we caused. The messenger remains silent. There is no accusation. No anger. Only patient observation. Because this story is not about revenge. It is about what happens when truth finally catches up with a heart that has been running from it for far too long. Meanwhile, the family at the center of this story senses that something invisible has shifted. No one says it aloud. One person stares out a window longer than usual. Another rereads an old message they never deleted. A child notices adults whispering in another room. Small details. Almost impossible to notice. Yet together they form the first quiet movements of a chapter that none of them expected to begin. The messenger gazes toward the horizon where tomorrow waits like an unopened letter. Within that unseen tomorrow rests news capable of changing every conversation inside that home. Not because it erases yesterday, but because it forces every heart to confront what yesterday left behind. And just as the first hint of that news begins its journey toward the family, something unexpected happens. The one who caused so much pain makes a decision they never imagined they would make. And before anyone in the house realizes what is unfolding, a knock is about to echo through the front door. The knock came only once. Not loud enough to frighten anyone. Not soft enough to be ignored. It was the kind of knock that makes a room fall strangely quiet before anyone has spoken a single word. The family looked at one another, each expecting someone else to answer the door. For reasons none of them could explain, time seemed to hesitate. The messenger of light watched silently. In this story, every heartbeat mattered. Every choice still held the power to change another life. The one who finally opened the door did so with uncertainty resting in their eyes. Standing outside was a familiar face, older than memory had preserved, wearier than anyone expected, carrying no gifts, no explanations, and no certainty that the door would remain open. It was the one who had caused the deepest wound. For a long moment, neither person spoke. Some silences are heavier than arguments. Some silences carry years of regret inside them. The visitor lowered their eyes. "I almost turned back," they whispered. No one answered. The house itself seemed to remember. Every wall held echoes of happier days. Every photograph seemed to ask whether broken things could ever become whole again. Inside the visitor's heart, another battle had already begun long before this moment. For many nights they had tried to convince themselves that apologizing would change nothing. They believed the damage was permanent. They believed forgiveness belonged only to stories. But something unexpected had happened. Not a miracle that split the heavens. Not a mysterious voice from the clouds. Instead, ordinary moments became impossible to ignore. A child laughing reminded them of what they had stolen. An empty chair reminded them of who no longer visited. An old family recipe reminded them of dinners that would never be repeated unless someone found the courage to take the first step. Regret had become louder than pride. Back inside the home, emotions collided without warning. One family member wanted the door closed forever. Another believed everyone deserved one chance to speak. A third remained frozen, unable to decide whether seeing this familiar face brought anger, relief, or sorrow. The messenger observed every emotion without judgment. Because this story was never about pretending pain never happened. Real healing never begins by denying the wound. It begins by looking directly at it. The visitor finally lifted a folded envelope. "I wrote everything I never had the courage to say." No one reached for it. Not yet. Words written on paper cannot instantly repair years of broken trust. Still, they can become the first stone placed across a river too wide to cross. Minutes passed. No one noticed the afternoon sunlight slowly changing color as it stretched across the living room floor. Outside, life continued. Cars drove by. Birds crossed the sky. Neighbors watered flowers. The ordinary world had no idea that inside this quiet house, hearts were standing at the edge of one of life's most difficult decisions. Forgiveness. It is one of the smallest words. Yet often the longest journey. The visitor's voice trembled. "I cannot change what I did." The room remained silent. "I cannot return the years." Still no answer. "But if there is even the smallest chance that I can stop causing more pain, I want to begin there." Those words hung in the air. Not as a demand. Not as an excuse. Simply as truth. The messenger's gaze shifted toward another corner of the house. Hidden in a drawer rested something no one had opened for years. A faded journal. Inside were handwritten pages filled with prayers, hopes, disappointments, and dreams that had quietly survived every storm. One sentence stood out among them. I hope one day bitterness no longer becomes the loudest voice in this home. No one remembered writing it. Yet somehow it had waited patiently for exactly this day. The wind outside grew stronger. Leaves danced across the yard. Clouds gathered above the neighborhood, not as a sign of fear, but as a reminder that even the darkest skies eventually make room for sunlight again. The visitor finally placed the unopened letter on a nearby table. I don't expect forgiveness today. They stepped backward. I only wanted you to know that every day I carry the weight of what I became. Tears appeared in eyes that had refused to cry for years. Not because every wound had disappeared, but because truth had finally entered the room without pretending to be anything else. The messenger knew something the family did not. This visit was only the beginning. The real turning point had not yet arrived. Far away, another phone began to ring. Someone answered. Their expression changed almost instantly. A message was spoken in a trembling voice. It concerned the same person standing at the doorway. No one inside the house had heard it yet. Within minutes, that heartbreaking news would arrive. It would force every member of the family to choose between resentment and compassion. The visitor looked back one final time, unaware that life was about to change forever. The messenger whispered softly into the silence of this fictional tale. Sometimes the greatest test of the human heart begins after the apology, not before it. Just then, a car pulled hurriedly into the driveway. Its tires stopped abruptly. The driver's door flew open. A frightened voice called out the visitor's name with unmistakable urgency. And in that instant, every person inside the home realized that the heartbreaking news they never expected had finally arrived. But no one was prepared for what they were about to hear. The hurried footsteps echoed across the driveway before anyone could move. Every face turned toward the open doorway. The visitor, who only moments before had stood weighed down by years of regret, froze in place. Their expression changed the instant they recognized the panic in the driver's eyes. What happened? They asked, barely able to breathe. The answer did not come immediately. Some news is so heavy that even the strongest voice struggles to carry it. The messenger of light watched from beyond the horizon of this fictional story, not with satisfaction, but with quiet compassion. For this was never a tale about punishment. It was always a story about the mysterious ways broken hearts discover what truly matters. The driver finally spoke. There has been an accident. The word settled over the house like a sudden winter wind. No one moved. No one interrupted. No one even realized they had stopped breathing. The visitor's face turned pale. Is everyone alive? The driver lowered their eyes before answering. They're alive, but the doctors don't know what the next few hours will bring. A silence deeper than grief filled the doorway. Inside the house, emotions that had been locked away for years began rising all at once. Anger whispered, they deserve this. Sorrow whispered, no one deserves pain. Fear whispered, life can change before the next heartbeat. The messenger seemed to draw near, not to command, but to remind every heart that compassion often appears when people least expect it. The visitor's knees nearly gave way. Only minutes earlier, they had come carrying an apology they believed would never be accepted. Now another burden had been placed upon their shoulders. I should have been there, they whispered. If only I had gone sooner. Those unfinished words carried more weight than any explanation. One member of the family instinctively stepped forward, then stopped. Years of hurt still stood between them like an invisible wall. Could one moment erase countless painful memories? No. But perhaps one moment could begin something new. The oldest photograph hanging in the hallway caught the afternoon light. In it, everyone was smiling. Not because life had been perfect. Because hope had once seemed natural. No one noticed that photograph before. Now everyone did. The visitor looked toward it and quietly began to cry. Not the tears of someone seeking sympathy. The tears of someone finally seeing everything they had lost. I thought I had more time, they admitted. I kept telling myself I would make things right tomorrow. The room remained still. How many lives, the messenger wondered, are built upon the dangerous promise of tomorrow? Tomorrow to apologize. Tomorrow to forgive. Tomorrow to call. Tomorrow to return home. Yet tomorrow is a gift no one is promised. The driver checked their phone again. Another message appeared. Their expression changed once more. The hospital is asking for immediate family. Those words pierced every heart inside the house. Without another thought, coats were gathered. Keys were picked up. The old arguments that had seemed so enormous only an hour before suddenly felt strangely small against the uncertainty of the present. As they prepared to leave, the visitor hesitated beside the letter resting on the table. I suppose you'll never need this now, they said softly. But before they could take it back, a gentle hand reached for the envelope. I don't know what's waiting for us, the family member said. I don't know if forgiveness comes today or months from now. They looked directly into the visitor's eyes for the first time in years. But if life has taught us anything today, it's that hearts should not remain closed forever. The visitor broke down completely. Not because everything had been repaired. Because, for the first time, hope had entered a place where only regret had lived. The cars pulled away together as evening settled across the town. Streetlights flickered on one by one. The sky glowed with shades of gold and deep blue, as though reminding every traveler that darkness and light often share the same horizon. At the hospital, long corridors stretched ahead. Machines hummed softly. Families sat together in quiet prayer. Doctors moved quickly from room to room. Hope and uncertainty walked side by side. Hours passed. No one spoke very much. Sometimes love is revealed not through words, but through simply remaining beside one another when no answers exist. The visitor looked across the waiting room. The faces that once refused even to look at them now sat only a few seats away. The distance between hearts had not completely disappeared. But neither was it as wide as before. The messenger smiled gently. Not because suffering had visited this family, but because compassion had refused to leave them alone. Near midnight, the doctor finally appeared. Every person stood at once. The doctor's expression carried exhaustion, but also a quiet calm. The danger has passed, the doctor said. There will be a long recovery, but they are expected to live. A wave of relief swept through the waiting room. Some cried openly. Some simply closed their eyes in gratitude. The visitor quietly stepped away from the others. They looked through a nearby window into the night sky. I don't know if I'll ever deserve another chance, they whispered. But if I receive one, I won't waste it. The messenger's final words drifted through the silence of this fictional tale. The greatest miracle is not that pain never visits a family. The greatest miracle is that love can still find its way back after pain has tried to convince every heart that hope is gone. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight touched the hospital windows. It was not the ending of every sorrow. And somewhere beyond the rising sun, the messenger continued watching over the countless stories still waiting to be rewritten by courage, humility, and love.